Excellent. So for anyone who is unfamiliar with the meeting innovation community, welcome, welcome, welcome. In this community, small and mighty though we might be, it's our mission to help close the knowing doing gap and spread successful, excellent meetings to teams everywhere. We do that through events, shared resources, research projects, community forums, and live interaction opportunities like this one. Speaking of live interaction opportunities, before I turn this over to Max today, if you have not already or you have not yet planned to do so, please join our ongoing experiment in the New Rules for Work project. There's a session for that scheduled actually this afternoon, and you can see all of the others that are scheduled and continue to be scheduled there. It's fascinating, and we would love to have you and everybody you know participate in that, as long as they're over 18 and willing to be recorded and can speak English. So everybody you know, except some other people who can't come. Today, however, our very, very specific focus is to learn about Dive.io. So we're going to spend 60 minutes on this. Going to turn it over to Max Satter, who is the founder and representative from Dive today, who's going to walk us through what they do. And then we'll spend the second part of our time providing feedback. So if you like to provide feedback out loud, that opportunity is coming. And if you do not, we collect feedback also in an anonymous form and forum. So I encourage you at this very moment, so that you don't forget, to go ahead and open that link. Open the feedback form. So should you find yourself out and about later today and say, I really actually do have a really great idea for Max, that form will be staring you at the face and you can fill it out. And with that, Max, all yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Elise, for having me today. Also, Lee, I saw your cup. Before I start, I just want to call out, I love your I Love Meetings cup. It's a pretty fantastic cup. I need to get me one of those. And nice to meet you, Sarah, John, and Nicole. Pleasure, and looking forward to diving in. Unfortunate pun was in fact intended. So I think the way I was thinking about running today's conversation, or at least my section of it, was focusing on three key things initially. Number one, how Dive actually started. Number two, our mission. And number three, tactically, how do we, through product, try to deliver against this mission? So the origin of story of Dive is actually pretty surprising. So Dive as a company has been around for several years now. And Dive was initially founded right in the very beginning of COVID as an employee engagement platform. So my co-founders and I, we had all been working remotely actually for several years prior to COVID. And we felt that our teams were oftentimes not the most engaged. And when compared to previously working in the office IRL, working remotely had a unique set of challenges, one of which was employee engagement. So we set out to found Dive, went out, raised money from a bunch of capital firms like Sequoia, Zoom invested, a bunch of other places as well. And our mission was to, how do we increase the sense of belonging? After about a year of this, a year of hundreds of thousands of folks use the platform, we ran many interventions, many different A/B tests. Happy to talk about all of these. What we found was the single most effective intervention, so only one intervention, was actually decreasing the number of meetings. And this was really shocking to us, very shocking, and also very damning to Dive in that current form, because what we were trying to do was have folks come together virtually online. So that was pretty damning to our thesis. And we realized that we had to do something. So given this new North Star or the same North Star, but this new insight that, hey, listen, if we can actually decrease the amount of meetings that folks have and improve the ENPS, the Employee Net Promoter Score, around meetings specifically, this will have massive second order impacts on how folks are feeling within their work. So then we decided to make a hard pivot. This is around 14 months ago, 13 months ago. And you'll now see Dive in its current form, right? And I'll show you the product later on, but this brings me to the second bullet point of our mission. We exist to serve as your own personal AI executive assistant or your own personal meeting assistant. I think our philosophy and perhaps one of the sections I think, Elise, that you mentioned to focus on is where we might fail. Our philosophy, and perhaps there's some weakness here. We'll find out. Our philosophy is that most people conceptually have a decent idea of what they should be doing. They intuitively know they should probably create an agenda or an expected outcomes document prior to a meeting. And this should be done either, a single player and share with other folks, or best case scenario, collaboratively, where other people can actually see what the expected outcomes are, so they're aligned before they even enter the meeting. They know that they should previously consult what was discussed, the action items, in all prior meetings with these folks. This is all before the meeting. During the meeting, they know they have to kind of simultaneously be very, very active, whether it's a listener or a speaker, but also take amazing notes. And this duality is really, really difficult. And I think this is one of the places where Dive is really, really working. They know that they should be kind of keeping track of the agenda and time and making sure that no one person is dominating the conversation too much. After the meeting, they know that initially they should right away, before they have any other meetings, write down what was discussed before they forget it. And when I say write down, I mean kind of organize their thoughts, because we've all been in those back-to-back meetings where at the end of the day, it's 8 o'clock at night and you're saying, what was that thing discussed in my 2 p.m.? And the resulting anxiety you feel inside your chest when you're scared that you might be forgetting an action item. So they should instantly, or whenever the closest chance, coalesce, organize all of their thoughts, and then share these with everybody and make sure everyone's aligned and checks off that, hey, listen, this is what was actually discussed. Now, I just spent, I think, 3 or 4 minutes talking about what people should be doing. The reality of today's situation is that almost nobody, I would guess probably the 6 of you here are in the 99th percentile at this. And even still, we can acknowledge that we don't do all of these things ourselves. And why is that? The answer is because it takes a lot of time. It's difficult. And the cost of not running best-in-class meetings is a hidden cost. If you don't send a follow-up email to someone and they never respond, that's very clear. If you don't bill somebody, the cost of that is very clear. But the cost of not following best meeting practice, it's very, because it's kind of hidden initially, it's very insidious. So then folks don't actually do all of these things. So our goal at Dive is to, number one, our mission, right? Going back to how we serve as your own AI-powered meeting assistant. It is to leverage, number one, artificial intelligence. As I'm sure you're all familiar with the state-of-the-art models today. And number two, existing software to make it really, really easy for everyone to get closer to following these, best-in-class meeting practices, right? So it's a mixture of software to kind of guide folks around the before the meeting, the during the meeting, the after the meeting. For example, we have meeting agendas, as well as artificial intelligence during the meeting to actually not only record and not only transcribe, but actually summarize everything that happens in a meeting. So that's the mission at a high level. Elise, I don't know how you typically do these sessions. Do you want to do a question and answer? I can pause there, or should we keep on going, firing to the next session? Whatever you think makes most sense.
I think that would be great. I think a couple quick question reactions on the basic hypothesis and background would be fabulous if anybody has one. And then let's see what you got. So Lee had an observation in the chat, if you want to read that one. And does anybody else have a quick question or a thing like that? Go ahead and indicate.
I would just say to that question, I think a lot about, we just assume they're best practices of meetings and people know how to do them, but maybe they learn that, maybe they don't, maybe they pick it up from a good manager, maybe they don't. But I think there is room for a system, a software, a something to put up guardrails and maybe teach as well as it also assists.
I totally agree with you, Lee. And in order for Dive to succeed, we have several key hypotheses that must be either true or partially true. And this was one of our hypotheses that people have, and it wasn't actually, we wrote out many of our hypotheses down on a piece of paper, or rather on a Dive agenda. This one was not one that was written down. It was kind of just implied, an implicit assumption. And you're totally right. Most folks, right? When I said like this is our thesis, a lot of folks don't know how to run best-in-class meetings. And even the first time Elise and I spoke, she mentioned a lot of frameworks, which I'm embarrassed to say I didn't know myself. I was like, oh wow, I should look into this, or I should read this book. So I totally agree. I think there's a massive gap in the market. In part, Dive's agendas are maybe a band-aid solution, but I think there's totally a gap in the market, and I'm not sure if it'll succeed as a business. I'm not, because people just aren't willing to put in the work, perhaps. But there should exist a solution that does just this, that teaches people how to learn a meeting. Whether it's the consulting, like I know at least you do. Whether it's a platform, I totally agree with you, Lee, 100%.
So I think what you're talking about is, you were talking about your hypothesis was the knowing doing gap, right? The people know intuitively or supposed to because they've been trained, but they don't do. And in companies, I used to work for a large company that actually did have meeting training. And the way they closed the meeting, the knowing doing gap was meeting performance was part of your job performance review. So they used basically the stick and the carrot of that to have you, they took you through training, but then they used the part of your performance review was that. So that's a high end, thing. So what's interesting about what you're approaching is, what you're saying is, and back to what Lee was saying was, you could maybe close that knowing doing gap with these personal assistant that is your wingman, sort of making it happen for you without having to have the performance review carrot stick organizational piece. Because most companies don't have that training, and they don't have that performance review stick to wield to enforce.
Yeah. I think I really like the way you at least initially, and now you, John, kind of talk about the knowing doing gap. That's exactly what we do. We make it easy, or our mission, our goal is to make it really, really easy to do, because there's too much friction involved in the day-to-day. Way too much friction. Taking meeting notes. I mean, each of the step before the meeting, during the meeting, after the meeting, each one requires a lot of energy, right? You have to go out of your way to do these things. Now, to Lee's point, right? That makes it really easy, but to Lee's point, if you don't even know, then there's an issue. But exactly, right? Like, that's why through the software and the AI, for example, with Dive, you never have to take meeting notes from scratch ever again, talking about the product. And again, this feature alone, I would say, is a bit commoditized. There are a bunch of other platforms today that have AI summaries, and that's awesome. I think they're all great. But the question is, what do you do with this summary? What is the user flow you put this into? How do you kind of have these guardrails up to make it more than just, hey, here's some notes, boom. How do you make this actionable? How do you store this? How do you taxonomize this? All of these things.
Sounds like it'd be awesome to see.
For sure. So I will, any other questions or comments before we hop into this here?
Yeah,
Sarah.
I'll chime in. This is awesome, and thanks for hosting this, Elise. I am really interested in hearing the whole show and tell, but I and agree and relate to all of the hypotheses and all the comments made. One thing that I'm just really curious to hear about is just I think companies are really scared of like ChatGPT and all the AI tools, because it's like, it's all new. I mean, it's not that new, but it's like new in this way, and people are just coming around to figuring out how to like integrate it into their business system streams and operations. And there's a lot of fear around, entering or sharing proprietary or in like intellectual property into the system, or opening that up, or like having the Alexa in your house, type of thing. So I'm just curious, as you talk, if you could speak to kind of like if that layer, and if there's any level of like concern or confidence for companies to be able to use this tool, in terms of like what you put in the system is like protected or not, just being upfront and having clear expectations upfront, like what the implications of using the tool would be from sharing your personal company information.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, and super salient as well, because that definitely is, for example, yesterday we just closed a deal with one of the larger deals that we've closed, and and one of the key it wasn't ultimately a blocker, but one of the key concerns was exactly this, right? So maybe breaking this question down, there are a few parts. Number one is, I guess there's high level concern, right, with AI. There's some concern like, hey, this is going to take my job in some industries. Which isn't that relevant for dev, and I can talk about that in a second. There's other concern about, hey, what are you doing with my data? Can you see my data, right? Which I think is true with any software. But I think that kind of goes into, are you training your system on my data, right? So is your system getting better with my data? And then also, is the system that you're feeding my data into training it, right? So is my data safe? So to the first question about, is this going to take my job? Surprisingly, I think the one job that is most likely to be displaced, if you will, would be that of an executive assistant. But we've actually seen a lot of adoption in executive assistants, because most EAs are not just joining meetings and taking notes. They are managing the lives truly of their bosses. And saying they're a note taker is definitely, like, no one here said this, but a myopic understanding of what an EA does. And they love Dive because it just frees up, if you think about like RAM, memory, space, energy in their mind. No one likes to take meeting notes. No one. So there's that, right? Other industries, definitely existential risk. It always happens. Disruption. It's good. It's not good. It's not bad. It just is. It's the arc of technology. To the second point of the people seeing my data, I think there's nothing unique about, hey, can you see my data? Are you GDPR, HIPAA, SOC 2 all compliant, whether it's traditional SaaS or AI? So we just made sure, for example, that we are HIPAA compliant. So HIPAA compliant, for everyone who doesn't know, essentially means that you can work with healthcare companies where PII, personally identifiable information, is shared. I think, Sarah, what you're saying, where it gets super interesting and this sort of thing is getting a little bit gnarly, and there is existential fear, is, hey, is this data that we're speaking about in our meetings being used to improve your model? And the answer with Dive is no, unless we ask you to. So we use our own meetings to train our model, number one. And number two, there's this thing called synthetic data, which is not real meetings, but essentially AI can create meetings and then train itself on this synthetic data. So that's how we do this. But pretty much in every single deal, Sarah, this comes up. It is definitely a worry. People do not want their data to be included in the training set. We hear that pretty much across the board. Data is the new oil, truly. And we can see this not only internally at Dive, but synthetic AI sounds like like a sign of the end times. Going back to what I was saying, so absolutely, Sarah, 100%. People are worried about this. People are concerned about this, and we have to mitigate that risk by doing, number one, the retraining on our own meetings, and also using AI to generate meeting notes or transcripts rather, and then summarizing those. the last point
You'll
about
be-
the, go ahead.
You'll be welcome to use these meetings to train your AI.
Amazing. Awesome. Amazing. Amazing.
And I bet about this point it'll be like, hey, show us some things.
I'll get to that in 30 seconds. And then the last point is about the models that we use. So we work with 3 specific models. The first model we work with is GPT-4, so OpenAI's GPT-4 through an API. So not ChatGPT, but it's similar, the same tech behind it, just the API. The second model that we work with is Anthropic, which is Google and Anthropic have closely aligned. And the third is actually an open source model, right? Which is called Llama, LLAMA, which is Facebook's model. It's been open sourced. So depending on the how secure and data, worried about privacy, the end customers, for example, we work with a US government agency. With them, we use Llama because it's open source and we host it ourselves. So the answer is it's a spectrum, and those are things that people definitely are, for enterprise deals, worried about. Individually, most people don't seem to care, but when you sell to a company and you go through the IT and security departments, it always comes up. Does that answer your question? Cool. All right. What else? So I think we've spoken now a bit about how we started, the mission. I think it makes sense maybe to show you the product now, right? Does that sound good, Elise? Okay, awesome. Let's do it. So I'm going to share my screen here. Cool. Can everybody see my screen? Yes? Awesome. Okay, nice. Let's pick. So before I start giving a demo, we can do this one, 9:45 to 10:30. So this is the AI generated summary. So before I start showing the platform, I think something that's important to keep in mind is we learned the hard way that anything out of our end users' existing workflow and their existing habits requires extra energy for our end users to expend, and therefore decreases the likelihood of adoption. So one of our North Stars, our guiding principles, is how do we work within the existing workflow of all of our end users, every end user. So for that reason, we have and I'll show you this, we have a super close integration with the Google platform as well as the Zoom platform. We have our own Zoom app. We also have our own platform, which is utilized by the heaviest of users like myself. But a lot of our users actually never even spend much time interfacing with what you're going to see here, this web app. So what I'll do is I'll start by showing you the web app. And from there, I will go into one of our other workflows, which is through the Google Workspace. So at a high level, you can think about the Dive product again from before a meeting, during a meeting, and after a meeting, right? These are the 3 steps. And oftentimes after the meeting and before the meeting blur, because a lot of meetings are in fact recurring, right? So on the left side of my screen right here, as you all see, I'm scrolling up and down. You can see all of, I have physical therapy, I broke my foot. You can see all of my meetings on my calendar. A lot of meetings here. You see list, you can see calendar. You also have tasks here. You also have recordings, right? So click on recordings. I can see all the meetings I've recorded. All right, pretty straightforward. We have integrations, a bunch of other things, but let's start here. So I'll kind of walk you through my workflow. So let's go back to a specific meeting I like to use. Let's use this meeting, the business and go-to-market sync. Every Monday, we have a business and go-to-market sync, right? And with this business and go-to-market sync, we have a pretty specific agenda. So I'm going to click on this meeting right here. I clicked on the meeting, and now you will see in a second, my computer's running slow today, apologies. Right? Here you see the template, right? Updates from previous week, growth, marketing, right? this is right here. We see max updates. Here we go. Now, what's really cool is that if we can also actually see AI generated meeting summary. So for example, let's click on Joseph. Oh, that's not good.
Never fails. Young tech. Live demo. Happens to us all.
Cool. All right. So let's click on, for example, let's do this one right here. So what's also really cool is I'll click on this one because we ended up canceling this meeting because we realized that there was not that much to speak about, which was awesome. We got through everything in 3 minutes. What's also really 4 minutes and 13 seconds, I should say, rather. What's also really cool here is that the AI automatically joins the meeting. And you can also ask AI to write. So for example, ask the AI to add a follow-up email. So let's start at the beginning of the workflow again. So first of all, I can create an agenda. Click on agenda, and I can choose a template. So we have a bunch of templates here. You can create your own custom templates. So I'll click on custom templates. For example, here, I'll click on the business team check-in. Click on this. And right here, you can see this existing template is applied for goal update from the team, each person. This is actually an old template. Or we can do a weekly meeting right here, right? So we've created a bunch, or we can do, there's so many templates. You get the idea. Making a decision. Let's see what this one is. Right? And you see timers on the right-hand side of the screen here as well. So essentially, you see templates to start off with. You can choose a template. You can apply a template to all recurring meetings, which is really cool. So that's before the meeting, right? You can also take notes here. So right, let's say I'll go down here. Can add a discussion title. I'll add some action items. 1, 2, 3. Can check it off. Can assign it to people. You get the idea. So this is all before the meeting. Now, what's also really cool before the meeting is we have this tab called automations. So a lot of the times meetings are about check-ins and updates. Not all the time, but some of the times. So what you can also do is you can collect inputs and updates from meeting participants before the meeting. So what I've done is every meeting that I am the owner, where I am the organizer, I request that my participants add their inputs and updates. So what they'll usually see is an agenda with a section said Elise, a section with Lee, Sarah, and so on and so forth. And this is really cool because in the past, this usually requires a Slack message or an email or a nudge. Hey, please fill out the agenda. But now automatically via our Slack integration or over email or whatever you want, we will automatically request, hey, please fill in your own inputs or the updates from last time. And here's what was previously discussed last time. So that's really cool. So that's before the meeting. Now, during the meeting, what happens? Our AI automatically joins, takes notes, action items. Beautiful, brilliant. Say goodbye to taking notes manually ever again. Truly. Now, is it 100%? No, it's not. And I think this is, kind of calling out places where we have to improve and to succeed. We're confident our AI is ahead of where the market is today. We've done a lot of special training on top of the models that we use. With that said, sometimes it's not good enough. And we have lost a couple of customers. Just, it's a numbers game where let's say they had 10 meetings and 3 of those meetings returned bad summaries. So we have to earn the trust and maintain the trust of our end consumers that the AI summaries are in fact good enough. Right? So let's go over here. I want to show something. So that's during the meeting. Now, after the meeting, what happens? After the meeting, the summary is automatically sent to all participants. If you want, you can edit that in the automations tab. And it goes, if it's a recurring meeting, you'll see in the related meetings tab. So now what does this mean? Again, before the meeting, you create the agenda, but you probably use an existing template because most of your meetings probably follow a template. Instead of having to manually request people like you do usually, what happened? It automatically requests people to put their inputs. During the meeting, instead of manually taking notes, what happened is the notes were automatically taken and the summaries were generated, the action items were generated, assigned to the relevant people. And after the meeting was taxonomized, stored in the right place. For example, you'll see a bunch of related meetings here. This is a recurring meeting, as well as sent to all individuals. So here, for example, we can see the summary, the AI summary from May 29th. For example, discussed Memorial Day weekend activities, talked about dashboard, possible. So I was talking about right here, we lose it sometimes. We just keep on scrolling down. These are all AI generated action items. Boom, and here's the summary, things to discuss. May 22nd, right? This is really cool. And what are the second order impacts of this? I'm going to stop sharing my screen for 1 second. There are a few things. Number one, of course, people save time. And this is why people start to use Dive. They say, hey, listen, this can save me 4 hours of work a week. But more importantly, what we find is that this drives people to be more accountable, more aligned, and ultimately more productive. When it's really easy for all of us to see what Max Satter agreed to, when we have a shared, not a shared video repository, but actually a shared workspace, where it says Max was supposed to do 1, 2, and 3, I will do 1, 2, and 3. It holds us more accountable by driving visibility and alignment. And that's really powerful. And that is the true ROI of Dive. It's tough to measure, but wow, when people talk about it, it's really incredible. What else is there? I guess I'll show very quickly the Google Calendar workflow, because this is pretty powerful. And then I'll stop talking for a second because I don't want to drone on too much. All right, I'll share my screen again. Cool. Can everybody see my screen? Yes, awesome. All right. So here is my calendar. Nice. Let's click on a meeting that I know we used AI in. This one. So click on this, and here I can click on my meeting notes and agenda on Dive, or I can click on Dive right here. So click on this, and boom. Right, I can scroll down, up and down. I want to click on specifically, which meeting do I want to go to? This one right here. I click on this. And within my Google Calendar right here, I can actually see the agenda and the AI generated notes for this meeting, which is really, really powerful, right? So I can see the summary by Dive AI. I can also ask Dive to write a follow-up email, which is awesome. This is, again, kind of closing the loop. A lot of the times you have to send an email after a meeting. This is mostly for external, because internally we automatically send an email to all participants if that's what you want. You can also add a tag, so I can group, let's say, Nitesh, right, one of my co-founders, my partner, and I. Let's say we have 4 different kinds of meetings a week, but they're not recurring. There's one-off. I can add a tag saying Max and Nitesh, so it will automatically group all meetings with Max and Nitesh together. This is really powerful. So the way that I actually use Dive is that rather than going into that workflow all the time, sometimes I'll just click, let's say, physical therapy. I'll click on this right here. I'll click on that right here. It's asking me to log in. I'll click on physical therapy, click on this, and right here, I'll actually just go ahead and take a little note, jot a little note for my physical therapy. I'm not going to do that because it's physical therapy, but that's really cool. Kind of quick a reminder within your existing workflow. This is really powerful, right? We're not asking people to go out of their way at all whatsoever. You create your agendas one time, you set it, you forget it. During the meeting, you can have the AI automatically join if that's what you choose. You can have it join the meetings where you're an organizer. You can have it join all your meetings. It can only have join by request, whatever you want. And then you can quickly take notes within the existing workflow. You can also actually send these things to Slack automatically. So you can set up Slack channels. We've done this. Let me pull up Slack on my own screen to try to find a meeting agenda that's not private. Give me a second. Okay. So this one's a few weeks old, so I can show this. So before I showed you the business and go-to-market sync, right here. So this is automatically sent. So in our hashtag business channel, automatically we have all the summaries sent, right? And this is, again, the Memorial Day weekend one, all of these things automatically sent. And again, this is about getting the notes and the action items to where they deserve to be, to where they should be, so then they're acted on it. Dev is capable of a whole lot of things. You can actually change the format of your AI summaries. We're launching this in the next couple of days to fit the summary. So you could say, you could create an agenda template saying, this template should have the AI reflect the questions and answers. Or this AI template the AI summary should give me the 3 most important topics discussed. This AI template should talk about 1, 2, 3. So the ability to kind of prompt the AI moving in this direction as well. I'm going to stop talking because this is a lot of knowledge. Does anyone have any questions, thoughts, concerns? Cool.
So I've asked folks to start to queue up questions in the chat. And so what we'll do at this stage is we'll do some questions, and then we're going to take a pause, and we're going to break into smaller groups and talk between ourselves about why this is brilliant and why this is doomed to fail, and share some of that with Max.
Awesome.
All right. Does everybody sound like a plan?
Sounds like a plan, Stan.
All right, Max. So questions in the chat. Feel free to call out anything you want to talk to. Let's give this about 8 minutes.
Cool.
Okay.
So first question I see here is, Lee, there are so many AI meeting assistants today. I've been testing Fireflies, Fathom, etc. How should users differentiate them? Got it. Great question. I get this every day, 4 times a day. The answer is differentiation only depends really on your use case. If you are a solopreneur or you work by yourself and your meetings are, the purpose of using Fathom or Fireflies is to have a meeting repository, and that's the only way you really use it, there is no differentiation. And in that case, Fathom is awesome. I would probably say use Fathom because for one person teams, they're free, whereas we charge. The key differentiation comes in when it becomes collaborative and multiplayer. So Dive actually initially started as a meeting management platform. Maybe you've heard of other platforms, kind of like before it shut down Hugo, before it shut down Docket. Another one is, like, there are a few of these. Fellows, another one. What these platforms are good at doing one thing. They're good at providing structure and guardrails for how to run the meeting before the meeting and how to store the notes after the meeting. The gap they have is actually making it easy for people to put down these notes during the meeting. So think about Dive as a Hugo or a Docket or a Fellow meets a Fireflies or a Fathom or a TLDV. And in doing so, we provide not only the guardrails, the structure, the way to organize and store and tag and create meeting agendas that are inherently collaborative and drive this accountability and this visibility, that powered by AI. So you have to do as little work as possible by yourself. That's what we say. For people who work by themselves, Pedram, it was a pleasure to meet. Thank you for joining and listening to me to drone on. I thank you for taking the time. So that's what we say, Lee. For folks who work by themselves and only want just like a system of record, and that's all, just a recording if they ever have to look back and aren't really trying to make it that actionable, it doesn't resonate. For folks who work on a team and are trying to increase the accountability and have it be more than just a recording, but actually a place where people work out of together that drives alignment, accountability, visibility, where people can look into previous notes and make sense. Does that make sense? Push back, by the way, like actually push back. I'm totally open to it. Okay, cool. Next message. I've been finding the AI meeting bots to be invasive, especially if I go to someone else's meeting. Potentially there could be 10 bots for 10 people in a meeting. Yeah. I think that this is true right now, but it is going to become a social norm very quickly. And there is one player on the market today that does not have the AI meeting bot join. But I actually find that to be a bit, I don't want to use the word misleading, but it feels a bit wrong to me. Like if I'm recording, I want to know I'm recorded. Right? For example, Zoom in the top left says recording. And that way I can say, hey, listen, I'm not okay with this. Now, I'm always okay with being recorded. I believe in radical transparency. And for me, it just, the value is incredible. I don't take meeting notes now. It's really fantastic. And I think people do find it, sometimes people find it invasive right now. But as we've been in market, the frequency in which I hear this objection has decreased more and more and more. And I truly, firmly believe that having your own AI meeting bot follow you around is going to be the norm. And totally socially acceptable. in 5 years from now, the people who are coming to the workplace will be like, that's weird that you think this. Like, this is totally acceptable. So that's something that I firmly believe. In terms of 10 bots for 10 people in a meeting, the way we have Dive set up is only one dive bot per workspace will join a meeting ever, just because I hear you there. Maybe there's a way to to hide this, but I'm sure that this will get solved. I think there's existential questions and current implementation social norms questions, and this one falls in the latter bucket. Nicole, any ideas on ways to leverage AI to help the facilitator design richer conversations? Synthesize themes that are rising real time, suggest more time for diversions, conflict. Ooh, interesting. If the conversation is trending in a certain direction, suggest engaging check-ins based on the attendees. Analyze how the meeting could be made more engaging in the future. That is an awesome question. Wow. Let me think. Let me read it again.
Nicole, there are some things we're playing with other techs that are more facilitation oriented as opposed to working team meetings. So definitely we have some tips for you on that one in other contexts.
If there's like AI to check out around that context, I haven't really dug into that at all.
That's some of what we'll talk about on the 13th or whatever I'm doing next month too, Elise.
So I think to answer the question, we have not thought about that too much, as it's not our North Star. There are a few things though that I think are low-hanging fruit, and I'm guessing that there are probably other platforms that are more focused on facilitator-led meetings is my guess. What I would say is real time is tough. Real time is really, really difficult, especially if real time requires you to be completely accurate. So for example, the reason why Dive's AI summaries are, I'd say, 90% of the way there, but then we give the person the ability to edit that summary the last 10% before it gets sent out to all meeting participants in real time, right? From a technical perspective, I believe doing this really, really, really well by leveraging AI is more difficult. The one thing that comes to mind that is totally technically possible is meeting time and sentiment analysis, or speaker time rather, and sentiment analysis. We don't do this today. It's in our roadmap at some point in time, but I think, again, so sentiment analysis, like Max, you're speaking way too quickly, because I always speak way too quickly. That is one thing, for example, that could help improve both facilitators, but also all participants. Let's say, I get a little signal, hey, Max, you're speaking 95% of this meeting. Maybe have other people speak up a bit. That's something else that could lead to richer conversations. In terms of actually analyzing the substance of the conversation and help nudge the conversation in different ways, that would be awesome. I have not really thought about it, though. I'd love to hear other thoughts. I think Lee and Elise both have some things to say here.
I haven't seen it work well in group settings in terms of real-time nudging. I know there are a couple teams working on it, but I haven't seen them get there yet. I've seen real-time nudging for individuals. So Poised for executives, anybody who's working on speaker training does a nice job. People seem to like that. Gong, Cogito, things like that do really well in support or sales contexts where you're dealing with a very known use case in a dyadic, just two people. And then on the facilitator side, there's some really cool things going on in terms of session design, getting people to interact with the AI to do some of what you talked about, like the summarization and clusterization and whatnot. We have a recording of our session we did with Storms earlier that shows some of that in the catalog, and then Lee's going to explore it more next month. But yeah, in terms of those kinds of things, I think it's a pretty different use case.
Yeah, I was wondering if I think one of the comments was about how to make future meetings more engaging, which sounds like you've got a meeting coach that after the meeting talks to you or summarizes for you sort of how things went and what went well and what you could improve in the future. Does a little meeting feedback for you, like your personal meeting trainer would be an interesting evolution. I think we're a ways away from that, but.
I second that. I just want the meeting trainer to be Elise and not, Jim from accounting, right? Like it's building on real best practices, not just the senior
Yeah.
person, right?
Yeah. So
That's
there,
great. I love the idea that.
so it depends on the culture of the organization you work in. Maybe some organizations, they all want Jim from accounting or whatever.
Well, and I think the thing you mentioned earlier, Max, like the bit about accountability and transparency being a total game changer in so many of these organizations really is a huge deal. Sarah knows that I do a program where I help people put in some basic, simple structures. And in one of those, the success case that came back was, oh my gosh, we got to fire that guy. And it was like the huge win. And I was like, can I put that on my testimonial page? By following Elise's advice, we got to get rid of the terrible people who are dragging our team down because we could see that they never did what they said they'd do. Right. So like some of those kinds of things really are huge game changers. So with that, we've talked about some ways that this is got opportunity. We've talked about some ways in which it's got some challenges. Let's break into a little bit of a private group. Okay, bye, Nicole. We're going to have a private group of 3. And you're going to spend 6 minutes. Nope, private group of 2. Oh, see, it's breakouts. They're magic leaders.
I think we've got our group of 4 right here.
That's true. So the questions, and we can talk transparently then, I guess. What's brilliant about this? And what's fatally flawed?
I'll go on mute.
And what intrigues you? Go ahead no, you can talk. You can listen. Well, you do actually turn your camera off. We'll treat this as a ritual descent. So let's talk openly about.
Do you want to talk or do you want to chat into it first?
I'm just going to close the door in the room I'm in. Sorry. Right there.
Whatever makes you happy. I think talking is awesome because my shoulder hurts. I don't want to type.
Brilliant. What is brilliant about it? I mean, there's so many just unlimited use opportunities. And I think the efficiency piece of like how much time you can save in your day. And I'm not worried about people's jobs being at risk. I think we're just figuring out ways to lean on tools and technology to make our lives way more efficient, and spend our brain capacity and energy in doing, other things and, the things that AI is less capable of doing essentially. And I don't know, the piece that is very intriguing to me too is like this accountability. Like there's so many meetings that I've been in that I'm the note taker, and that you just miss nuances of like an action item. And so it's just like a social safety net of like pulling and extracting information that you as the human with the 3D brain can go through and edit and make sure it captures everything and then get a collaborative. So I see it as like not like the 100% work, but it's like the 90% that like you can react to and edit that is just brilliant. So I love that.
Yeah.
Is it me? I mean, we were talking about this before we started the call, at least that I think the bar is just outrageously low for everything having to do with meetings, right? And so most meetings, like people are not taking notes, and they're not like it just to get to a point where there's cogent notes is a big deal, right?
Yeah.
And I think this idea that we're playing around with, it's like micro coaching people into better habits is really interesting. And I think this is probably where Dive is different than some of the other ones that are much more just like transcription based or something. But yeah, I mean, I think the world puts way too much faith, and maybe this is the fatally flawed part, on agendas are going to solve meetings, right? Like we come up with great agendas and then people don't know how to run meetings. So,
Yeah.
I think that's a great opportunity, but I think it also, it's like maybe it overpromises that we're going to have much better meetings because they're being recorded or something. The other like fatal flaw, I think, is just it's one more system and more data and more to process. And I think you can get stuck in a loop of like, we have so many meeting minutes and such a repository. And like, we actually just needed to make a decision on that thing yesterday and move forward. And I don't know if those are in conflict, but I think it's more data to think about and process.
Yeah, so I think you've kicked on something really interesting there. So the adoption barrier has to be, I think they're completely right. It has to be completely embedded in where you already work. So we saw Google. Yeah. I'm assuming Teams is on the list somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. If it's not there already. So yeah, it has to be in the flow, and it has to reduce cognitive load. And right now, because meetings are so terrible, even considering that you might run one well, increases cognitive load. Right. So I think the promise or the potential that might be really interesting, because you've got a before and an after and you understand sequences, would be to do some of what we've seen happen with AI in customer support, right? Where you say, okay, you're about to have a meeting. I'm going to have a meeting with Lee about this workshop he's going to run. And I start typing in like, okay, I'm going to have a meeting with Lee about this workshop. And it says, hey, you had a meeting with Lee about that workshop 5 days ago. Here's what was in it. Do you really need to do that again? Like, oh, wait, maybe I can just send him an email because I forgot what we said. Something like that, where it really helped trim would be fascinating. And then the other thing I've seen consistently for years on transcription tools is they create transcripts and people go, oh, that's cool. But because there was no involvement in confirming that that was correct while they were together, the accountability is actually really low. So there's this opportunity to take that summary while the call is still going and say, hey, you got 5 minutes left. What did we decide? What are we actually going to do? Here's what the AI caught. Is that correct? Are we truly committed? And then to actually save that. So you're getting the human part where that cognitive load is captured in the moment and the mutual commitment is created, which is why we meet, as opposed to just doing it by email. And tools that don't have those two things together couldn't ever do that. So I think there's some interesting opportunities there. Fatally flawed. Well, golly, tech is hard. And I think for all of us, because I ran a tech company, I do run a tech company that does meeting related tech. Good will never win when the big players do good enough. Yeah. Why would I buy a thing if Google's already doing it? Why would I buy a thing if I already have that in my existing toolkit? So that's a real challenge. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I think the integration piece is super important. And I know Max touched on that. You did, Elise. At least from the demo, it was hard to see like, okay, do these action items like aggregate into one repository, or is it just like on a post that lives in Slack somewhere, or, I use Microsoft To Do and Planner. And so if there was a way to like integrate with that workflow of like the action items that came out of this meeting and automatically integrate, that would be like, but obviously you need that like human editing, fact checking moment. And I love how you suggested using the meeting space to kind of everybody fact check together, because, one person's editing is less ideal than the collaborative effort.
Yeah. like kind of on a tangent here, and I think about that training piece and just like it's recording the meeting that's dysfunctional because Jim doesn't know how to run a meeting. Like, how do you fix that over time? And I think about the like the flight simulators, you know, and you're about to crash and it's like pull up, pull up, pull up, but it's telling you like how to do it. And I don't know what that looks like here, but I could imagine where it's like you're on a tangent, you're on a tangent, you're on a tangent. And it's like the system said that. It wasn't, you know, I didn't have to be the bad guy manager who jumps in here, but you know, I think it's just it's a step beyond transcription and whatever else, that there is some degree of like we're shaping the meetings over time. And I don't know what degree that is built into the humans or not, but I don't know, most meetings are just really bad.
Yeah. Well, looking at the, you know, the stuff in your demo list, or your existing calendar, any meeting that's called sync is just like saying it's a meeting. You know, it's a nothing word. So to be able to get to the place where you can autocorrect, you have to know what the destination for that plane was, right? You have to know how high it's supposed to fly so that you can tell it it's too low.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you were to do one thing that required a little bit more cognitive load up front from people, but then enabled you to help them skip meetings and autocorrect meetings, it would be getting clarity on the purpose. And even just a better meeting name would do it, right? Demo with meeting experts to learn what they think about our product. And if you got to the end and no, you never asked, well, it would be like fail, fail, fail. So speaking of, we are right here at the end. Max, please come back on. I hope you found that interesting or useful.
That was super, super interesting and definitely very useful. Very useful. Can you send the recording to me? I want to mull over this more after.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, in fact, I'll post the recording and the chat and all the things. And speaking of the chat, for those of you, you're all here, so you all know this, but repeating for Max's benefit, going forward, how to contribute to this space. Join our New Rules for Work experiment. I know Lee's planning to help host it with his community in July. And then feedback there. Join us again in the future.
Thank you.
With
Thank
that,
you so much.
100% officially done.
Thank you.
Very cool.
Thanks for having me and have an amazing day, everybody. I appreciate you taking the time.